Hey guys, welcome back to Cerebral and Fitness Podcast. I'm here with Rob Ekno. He's an author, a motivational speaker, a show host, and he's here to share us his story of 30 years of sobriety. Welcome, Rob.
Hey, David. Good morning. How are you?
Good, good. I'm excited to have you on, man.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Anytime I get a chance to hopefully share something that might help somebody else have a better life, that's always a really cool thing. What else are we here for, right?
Right, right. It always enlightens me when I get to embark on, being able to interview guests and hearing their stories and then being able to share it out there with the world to show them that no matter what obstacle you face, with a physical disability, mental obstacle, whether it's through struggles with addiction, you can overcome all of that.
Absolutely. Well, I was sharing before the show, and it's very well outlined in my latest book that just got published a week or two ago, Cruising Towards Heaven, navigating from rough seas, that's my addictive days, to miraculous adventures to where life has me now and God has me now. So,
Yes.
I had a flourishing broadcasting career up in New England for some time, and I was covering the World Series and all of the Boston sports teams and stuff. And all of a sudden, one day, I'm on a Greyhound bus going to live out of the Greyhound bus station in Fort
Oh
Lauderdale because
man.
I had nothing left. So, yeah, I mean, life turns quickly sometimes.
What World Series did you cover? Which ones?
Oh my God! Now you're gonna know how old I am.
Oh
1987 was the first one I covered. The Twins and the Cardinals at the Metrodome and at Busch Stadium in St. Louis, and the Twins won their first ever World Championship.
wow, that's pretty impressive. I mean, you have
It
the
was.
voice for it. I could tell you're a natural.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, and now I'm using my gift of the voice as I've gotten older to help others truly
Yes.
to have a better life. And I pray every day that God gives me the guidance. And I saw your podcast and he said, send something out to David and you and him can chat about the wonderfulness of helping people and just,
Yes.
especially in today's day, right, Dave? I mean, everything, I'm especially with the fentanyl and all of this stuff that's going on. I was just reading something. This may help somebody. I was just reading something. I was telling some friends the other day that people are now actually lacing fentanyl on dollar bills,
Wow.
folding up the dollar bills and dropping the dollar bills on the ground. And then when you go to pick it up and open it to put it in your pocket, you're inhaling the fumes. And people are, it's crazy what's going
It
on out
is.
there. I just read that the other day. So I've been telling friends, I'm like, look, I know you like to pick up money off the ground, but don't pick up the dollars anymore. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah, seriously, it's stuff like that.
yeah. I mean, you gotta be careful with that. With anything you handle. That's why we tell kids if you handle money, you gotta be real careful because you don't know where it's been. You know.
Absolutely. Especially crazy guys like me. In my old days, we used to roll up our dollar bills and snort that cocaine, right? And it was all laced with drugs and dirt. And,
Oh no.
it's those are, what's great is if you are able to survive, and I've been blessed to survive, obviously, and then you can look back and you go over your stories, which, when I was writing the book, Cruising Toward Heaven, my editor actually came to me one day with tears in her eyes and she said, "How are you even still alive?" Because I share stories of really craziness and stuff down in Fort Lauderdale and stuff, and areas I went into that I should have never been in, and just crazy choices that we make when we're not in a right mindset, whether it be through drugs, alcohol, or just fear, living in fear and not having any faith. Right?
Right.
It's got to be very challenging for people who have no faith whatsoever in today's day and age with, whatever it is, there's no food on the shelves or the gas price is so high or, trying to afford a place to live is so high, just all of this stuff. And people don't know what's going to happen tomorrow and they get so freaked out. But really, if, I trust in the Lord, the reality is at this point in your life, David, and at this point in my life, and anybody that's listening to us right now, we have always had every single thing we've ever needed in our life. How do we know? Because we're right here.
Yeah, we're here, we're making a difference, and as long as we have we give that voice and that passion, we can pretty much overcome anything.
Well, absolutely, and there's no reason to live in fear, and especially being been blessed to be sober. I just celebrated 30 years, not all that long ago, and so the funny thing is one of the stories in the book that you may enjoy, and this is the one that so when I was 10 years old, right in that range, living in New England, up in Rhode Island, I one day was working as an acolyte at my church, and I decided that I wanted to get something at the convenience store after mass. And so I took the collection plate into the sacristy, and then I decided to borrow $2 from Jesus, and quickly slipped it up under my gown into my pants. And anyways, for the next, I didn't start drinking till several years later because I was only 10. So, but for 17 years, I ended up drinking and then eventually using cocaine
Oh,
as well. And I always thought that I was being punished by God for stealing that $2 from him. And the reality was, I found out later that he'd actually been watching over me because I started
oh yeah.
making all these crazy choices, right? And so the very first amends, right, when you work with one of the anonymous programs, 12-step programs, you make amends, right? You pay back people or you apologize. Very first amends, I had 28 days sober. I was still homeless, living in my friend's basement. He was nice enough. And Christmas Eve came, and a guy with a bunch of dope came over to the party,
Oh
and he
no.
wanted me to party with him. And I had 28 days sober. I had gotten stopped for a DUI 28 days earlier. That would my last drink, November 29th, 1992. And I had 28 days sober, and now I'm at the crossroads, or they say in the 12 steps, the jumping off point again. And this guy's like, man, look at all the stuff I got. Let's party. It's Christmas Eve. And I'm like, I think I got to go to midnight mass, and I got to pay back the $2 that I stole from Jesus 20 something years ago. And so I only had a $5 bill basically in my pocket, but a friend let me borrow the truck, and I went to the same church that I had stolen the $2 from. And I went there and I sat there in the fifth row in the pew, and I just waited. And then finally the collection plate came by, and I just threw the $5 in there really quick. And I've never drank since. So I didn't know how much interest there was on $2 over 23 years, but I guess the Lord was happy with what I gave him, because it was not about me giving him a ton of money. It was about honoring him and respecting the fact
Right.
that it wasn't him that told me to pick up a drink every day or snort a line or chase a dope dealer. I made these choices because he loves us so much. He gives us free will. And he says, David, I got a great life for you. Rob, I got a great life for you. But if you have a better plan, feel free to go do it. And my plan, as anybody would read that book will see, was not the greatest plan. But it got us to you and me speaking today. So it got us to
Yes,
exactly where we need to be, right?
that's right. And they kind of backpedal a little bit. So 19 from like 1987 to 1991, I guess you were on the right track. Everything was going well for you. And when was that point that everything kind of started turning, you know, sour and going south?
Well, I mean, I was partying quite a bit. I was in with rock bands, and then I got a job on the radio in Rhode Island. I was the number one nighttime DJ there, and I was hanging out at nightclubs, and more white powder started to flow and stuff, and stuff like that. And then one day, I ended up being gone. This is one of the stories in the book, and so glad I was able to make my amends to my dad, who passed about a year ago. But
Oh, sorry to hear
I
that.
was gone for, yeah, thank you. It was a wonderful. It was his time, and it was a true blessing because I was able to be 12 inches away from his head when he took his last breath, and standing there. It was
Wow.
just it's a wonderful experience. We all have to go, so it's but as long as we're good with the people before they go, it's a good thing. And
Exactly.
my there was one point where my dad had so 3 weeks before Christmas, at one point in that time frame that you were talking about, I was homeless. I had lost everything, and I was living in my mother's basement in Rhode Island. I got a ride down to the beach about an hour away on the coast of Rhode Island. Met a guy. We met some girls. He had a house right up the street. I stayed there for 3 weeks. It was the day before Christmas, and I hadn't talked to my family. My dad was so worried about me. He had called his friends at the Rhode Island State Police. They had them all looking for me. Nobody knew where I was. I mean, it just had to be horrible for my parents. You know, you don't realize the horror that we put our families through when we're making certain choices in life. And anyways, the guy says to me that I was staying with, he's like, "Hey man, it's Christmas tomorrow. My mother doesn't want anybody here, and you got to go." Well, I didn't have a car. I had a really thin members only jacket. For those of you who remember those little thin members only jackets, I had no hat, gloves. I ended up, now I know what it was, but I ended up walking 12 miles to Route 95 in the freezing cold. It had snowed out a couple days before. I'm walking on piles of snow, and I got to the entrance ramp to walk on. I was gonna hitch a ride for the first time in my life. I had never hitched a ride, but I was like, I still had 30 miles to go to my mother's. And a tow truck driver pulls up the second I got on the exit ramp and said, "Hey man, where's your car?" And I said, "Well, I don't have a car." He said, "Well, somebody called for a tow and I can't find their car." And I'm like, "Well, it wasn't me." And I saw that his address was past my mother's house. So I said, "Hey man, before you go, would you mind giving me a lift, like 20 miles up the road?" Anyways, the next day was Christmas. My dad came over. Him and my mom were divorced, and he came over and sat with my family, and they offered to get me into a rehab. And I remember my dad, he sat there, and this story is in the book, and he said, "Son, I don't have a lot of money, but your mom and I'll get whatever it takes to get the money to get you into rehab." And I looked at my dad, having lost my career that you were just talking about, of covering World Series and being in all the Boston big pro sports events and all that stuff. I lost all my money. I had lost $35,000 from the sale of a house that I had a couple of years earlier. I snorted it all away, drank it all away. Homeless, no car, no job, no prospects. And my father says, "We'll help get you into rehab so you can start your life over." And I look at my dad with my mother there, my two brothers and sister, and I said, "Thanks, Dad, but I don't have a problem." That was where I was at.
Oh
And so when
no.
you say what was kind of the turning point thing, and then from there, I ended up taking the Greyhound bus to live out of in Providence, to live out of the Greyhound bus station in Fort Lauderdale. After 3 years, I made it back to Rhode Island, had a DUI the day after Thanksgiving, 1992. And my old girlfriend came to pick me up at 4:30 in the morning. And I looked at her from 20 feet away and I said, "I can't do this anymore." And she said, "I can smell you from here." And that was my last night. That was my last night of drinking. So that was the turning point. It was just like, I was fortunate that I had a rock bottom before anything devastating happened.
Right, and that's one of those things that a lot of people need to realize is if you can catch it, if you can catch any situation early, it prevents it from getting worse, you know?
Well, and you want to know a really cool thing that just happened not all that long ago. I went back to New England to celebrate my dad's 1 year passing. And while I was there, I got this thought in my head. I was driving the night I got stopped. I had borrowed a friend's truck. I was homeless, living out of my friend Steve's basement. And I was driving like the most ridiculous human being on planet Earth. How I didn't hit anybody, kill anybody, anything is just miraculous. And I still had a while to go before I got to where I was going at 2:30 in the morning after drinking all night. And I got pulled over by a police officer. Well, most people think that the police officer is, the bad guy, the this, that. And I realized after all these years, it was that guy, along with my brother pulling me into the 12-step program, that literally saved my life that night. And so it was only a matter of several weeks ago that I was back in New England celebrating my dad's 1 year anniversary. And I thought, oh my gosh, I got to see if I can find this officer and thank him for saving my life. And wouldn't you know it, the police department was able to get me his name and look up my records. He was retired now, of course, because it was 30 years ago. And the guy ends up, I was able to call the guy. He invited me to his house. And I got to go
Wow.
over there and shake his hand. And this guy, David, I mean, he looks like the starting guard for the Buccaneers or the Dolphins, just a huge, giant guy, right? Tall, I look like this little munchkin next to him. And I was there talking to him, and we had this amazing conversation. And in the end, he actually ended up with tears in his eyes looking down at me. And he said, man, that was really cool. He goes, nobody ever does that. He goes, everybody just beats us up all the time with, words or whatever. He said, but nobody ever thanks us. And I'm like, man, you saved my life. And because of that, I told him, because as you are very active in helping people, people that know me, I know I'm very active in my recovery program and work with many people in Southern California, Alaska, wherever I'm at a particular time. So I said, and all the hundreds of people that I've been able to share my experience, strength, and help and hope is all because of you. So we don't even know how many people you actually help by pulling me over and stopping me that night.
Yeah, it's incredible what the power of just going back to that person or that facility or that situation and just thanking them can do. Like for me, all I ask is for these kids that I work with, all I ask is you put your half, which is your effort, and I'll vouch for you to the end of the world. And
Right.
and they're they're always like, but what if this doesn't work or what if that works? I'm like, if it doesn't, we'll keep on working at it. And all I ask
Right.
is a thank you. That's all I ask for. I don't ask for anything else.
Yeah. I mean, and even if you don't get it, you can still go home and look in the mirror knowing that you put your all in, right? It's the same thing
Exactly.
with me when I work with people. I get calls all the time from younger people in sobriety and stuff, and people that are older too, that are newer to sobriety. Just and they'll call, and then they'll call me again 2 weeks later, and I'll say, so how's that thing going that we talked about you doing? Well, I didn't get around to it yet. And it's like, if you want peace in your life, there's a way to get peace, but we got to do the work. Like you're saying, younger people, yes, you may have been dealt some crappy cards along the way, but there's always the opportunity to throw some of those cards away and get some new cards. But it depends
Exactly.
on what kind of work that I want to do in order to have the dealer throw me those new cards, right?
All right. You just you gotta see what they throw at you. If it's a good hand, then go for it. If not, just keep on trying till you get it. Keep on trying. That's all
Well,
I do. Don't give up.
yeah, that's true. And because all of us are going to have to deal with something in life, whether it be financial, physical, whatever it is, relationship wise, whatever it is, we're all going to be dealt something. And then we all have to figure out, well, how do I make, they say success is not how much money you make, the house you have, all this. It's what you do with what you're given.
Yes, I
And
agree 1000%.
and one of the stories that it's not in this book here, excuse me, but one of the coolest stories is Dave Thomas. And if anybody knows Dave Thomas, he founded
Oh
Wendy's
yeah,
Hamburger,
Wendy's.
right? And he was a foster child,
Oh, I
right?
didn't know that. That's
Absolutely.
fairly
Yeah,
new.
read the story. So here's the cool story. The cool story is when I ended up at the Greyhound bus station, I had very little money in my pocket in Fort Lauderdale. So every day I would walk over to Oakland Park Boulevard, and Oakland Park Boulevard had a Wendy's. And at the time, this is years ago now, they had an all you could eat salad bar for 99 cents. So I would walk over from where I was sleeping on benches and stuff like that at night. And every day, sometime around 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I would go over there and I would eat all you could eat salad bar for $1.05 with the tax. And I would sit there for an hour or so and just eat as much as I could. And that's how I stayed alive for a good portion of starting off. And then what happened is I ended up living in Boca Raton. which is about 35, 40 minutes north, for those of you who don't know, from Fort Lauderdale to Boca Raton. And I was a bartender at a club. And one Sunday, the bartenders, it was Easter Sunday, and we all said, let's go out to eat at this place called Pete's Restaurant in Boca Raton. Never been there. So we get to Pete's, and we're sitting down, and everybody's crammed in like, really sardines. And there was nobody in the seats behind us. So I said to the waiter, I said, hey, would you mind pushing those seats back a little bit, just so we could have a little room here? And he said, well, I would. He said, but Dave Thomas is going to be coming in here shortly with
No
his
way.
family. They're good friends of the owner's wife, Pete rather, and they're going to be. So there I
Wow.
was, sitting back to back with the guy that unknowingly fed me, because
Wow, that is so
because
cool.
he technically was dealt a kind of a crappy hand in life and had to end up in foster home, but he didn't let that deter him. He said, what can I do to make a difference in this world? Just because I started off on a bad note doesn't mean I have to finish on a bad note, right?
Exactly.
And so all of us have that choice to make. Just because I was homeless didn't mean I had to continue on being a junkie or an addict or an alcoholic. I had a choice. And fortunately, my younger brother pulled me out of the realms of death. And then the officer stopped me, and it all worked out so far.
Yeah, it's like with me, I've lived with a disability my whole life, and I could sit here and mope and self-pity and feel sorry for myself, or make something of myself, make an identity. And here I am today, being a youth advocate, podcaster, motivational speaker. I was a former three-sport athlete, three-time state champion
Wow.
cyclist, uh,
Wow.
and all with this disability. And I've had 10 different surgeries. And I lost my mom too early on in life when I was 8 years old. I'm only
Oh,
32. So, hey, if you have the opportunity to move on in life, and there's people that believe in you and can support you, take it. I had my stepmom. She
absolutely.
saved my life. My stepmom saved my life.
Mhm.
I give her the world, because she could have chosen to keep living her youth and with my dad. Of course, my dad is still in my life too. Or I could have been in a wheelchair for the rest of my life and not be able to
Mm.
be where I'm at today. So, and it's all because of, God himself too. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here either.
Well, and the bigger the testimony, or the bigger the test, the bigger the testimony, right? So you
Right.
have this amazing testimony, and it's great when technically, and I don't know if I say this properly, but someone that has a physical disability, right? You can share. Like, I always think, whenever things are not going right for me, the first one I think of is my friend Tim, who has Parkinson's disease. An amazing story. And Tim was he drew the Smurfs and the Flintstones and all that. He worked at Warner Brothers and Disney for 50 years. And all of a sudden, one day, his whole arm went numb, and he
Wow.
couldn't draw anymore. And he was going over to one of the big medical facilities to get a brain surgery, actually. And before he did that, this doctor ended up finding a pill to give him that's kept him from getting brain surgery. But and he's got about 80% use of his arm again now, but he's retired. But before any of that happened, once he lost, he said, oh, I got to give up my career. And he looked at his wife, just like your stepmom did for you, obviously. And his wife said, honey, you have a left arm. He said, yeah, but I can't draw with my left arm. She said, why not? You have a left arm, use it. And now he, just like you, he's a motivational speaker. He gets asked to go places, but he actually made a wonderful book, Drawings from the Left. And now he draws his cartoons and all that stuff. He's not working anymore. He does it as a hobby, but he does it all. And he's published 2 books now, drawing from his left hand after 50 years of using his right hand. So he didn't have to give up what he truly loved because he had some kind of impairment happen. And the pills have worked for like 10 years now, I think. And it's been a long time, and he hasn't had to have the brain surgery, and it's been just enough to keep him, as he can't drive and certain things like that. But you know what? Everybody's all too happy to help him because, like you said, with your guys and gals that you work with, the younger ones, if you're willing to put some effort forward and show somebody that you believe in you, Well, somebody else, like God, for example, he says, David, you take one step towards me and I'll take 10 steps towards you, right? You have this physical ailment. I already know that, David. You're not surprising me by going, hey, Lord, look at me. It's like he goes, I know. And I'm going to use you, David, to motivate and inspire to help others to have a much more incredible life than they would have if they never met you.
Right, exactly, and that's why we're both of us are here today. Is we both have different objectives, but the same outcome is to help people get forward, to help people overcome that obstacle of of in your case, people that are dealing with addiction or homelessness, and myself, with kids, that are struggling to identify themselves, they're trying to find who they are.
One of the things about finding your stuff is what I've learned in my 12-step program, and also, just practicing. One of them is the 11th step, where we practice on a daily basis if we choose to. Again, a lot of people just show up at meetings and go, I'm here, but a lot of people really don't work the stuff. Like you said, you meet a lot of kids, and some of them are just like, you know what, I don't have there's no hope for me, so don't even waste my time, and those obviously we got to pray a little harder for. But if I think more about having you have a better day than me having a better day, I always end up having a better day.
Right.
And what can I do to you? And I'll share this. I have I have 3 books out. My
Yeah, definitely
latest
share
book.
it with us.
Yep, the latest book you see right there on the screen, Cruising Towards Heaven, is on Amazon, and it will soon be on Ingram, Spark, and Barnes and Noble. All of that. I just loaded it up there last night. But it was blessed to be a finalist out of thousands of books around the world that came in. It was one of 6 finalists in one of the awards recently. So I was blessed to be able to honor that. And then the last book might fit. Is it God or coincidence? Which is when you punch in on Amazon, it's right there with it. That one also is a finalist. We just loaded up a new cover, but in here I talk about some of the things where God, we think we're going in one direction to do something, and it's chapter 6 in that book, and it's called the higher reality of a higher purpose. And I had some ideas for some Alaskan reality shows, and I went there, and I was hanging out there doing some work, and there were homeless people on the street, and I was staying there close to where they all hung out every morning, and so I would walk by them, and for some reason, David, I have no idea to this day why I ever thought of it, but I just started saying, "Hey, you guys aren't going to hit me, are you?" And it was just a joke to let them know that, hey, I see you here. You're shooting up your heroin. You're drinking your beer. I don't care, but just don't bother me, right? And then they started getting used to me. And one day I'm walking down, and there was 8 of them standing there on the street across from the cruise ship docks in Juneau. And I said, "Hey, you guys, you're not going to hit me, are you?" And they said, "No, man, we'd never hit you." And I was shocked, right? Because they'd never said a
Wow.
word to me. It was like 2, 3 months I had been walking by them. They never said a word. And I stopped and I said, "Oh, that's weird. They actually said that. Let me go find out why they said that." And I walked back and I said, "Hey, man, you told me that you'd never hit me." And one of the guys said, "Yeah, that's right." And I said, "Well, why is that?" He goes, "Dude, we're out here every single day of the year, 365 days a year. At least 200 to 300 people walk by us every day." Said, "You're the only human being that ever says hi to us. So you're the last person that
Wow.
we hit." And I was at church a few weeks back, and the pastor for his sermon had done some homework, and he was talking about the homeless and how Jesus knew the poor man's name, but he didn't know the rich man's name, right?
Right.
And he was talking about, he said, in my research, I found out that 73% of all homeless people only hear their name said to them once every 3 months. Can you imagine being a human being and only have somebody call you by name once every 3 months?
That's awful.
But that's the reality of it.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
true.
have a story about it in my last book too. And I reality. The other day I was going to a submarine, sandwich shop, and there was a guy outside homeless. He was selling incense and stuff. And the first thing I did was ask him his name, and then I gave him a big hug. and I gave him a few dollars because he was out there working it, and he had this great spirit about him. He was not going to hit me. He was not going to steal my money. And who knows whether that infused him, to say, hey, maybe I can do something with my life. We never know when the miracle is going to happen. But our job is to inspire and motivate each other, right? To encourage
Right.
each other. It's not to knock each other down, and to realize I don't know what you've gone through. You don't know all that I've gone through, right? To get to where we were today. But I can tell you this, that, and I share in the book, I'm fortunate to be alive. This is how God works. During that time, I was down in Fort Lauderdale living out of the Greyhound bus station. At one point in time, I said, you know what? There's no point in me living anymore. I'm just taking up space on the sidewalk. I have no purpose in life. Why am I in the way of people skateboarding and bicycling and going to the beach and having a good time? I'm just an addict out here. And I was literally walking over to the cruise ship dock area down in Fort Lauderdale, where all the big cruise ships. And my plan was to jump in front of one of the cruise ships as it was pulling out, so it would just crush me to death and just end it and get it over with. Fast forward, and then I hear a voice in my head, and it said, "Why don't you go out to Hollywood and make something out of yourself?" And this is one of the stories in the book too. And so like a couple days later, I grabbed one of the free newspapers. I went over to the beach, by the way. I decided at the end not to go over. I went and pondered my future on the beach. And then a day or two later, there's an ad in one of these local freebie newspapers, and some guy was paying $200 to drive his Crown Victoria from Fort Lauderdale up to Providence, where I was from, and paid for gas and everything. And you just had to have it there. And so ended up getting a free ride home. Then eventually I got stopped for drinking and driving on that night after Thanksgiving, and ended up out here in Hollywood, which eventually took me to Alaska, where I now have my books and all kinds of stuff. But the funny part is, why do I have them? I ended up working on a private cruise ship in Alaska. And over the last 8 years, I have walked under glaciers, in ice caves under glaciers. I've flown in multiple helicopters, mushed with the mush dogs, walked on numerous glaciers, whale watching, hiking with the bears, all kinds of stuff. And then I ended up as a tour guide, as you could call it, a cruise host on a private ship, and we went on 23 cruises all over the place. So what's funny is that I tried to end my life. This is how God has his plans. I tried to end my life on a cruise ship in the late 1980s, early 1990s, down in Fort Lauderdale. And all these years later, I end up in Alaska on a cruise ship, having the time of my life. And through that, I have 2 books now. I have 6 more books already outlined, and they're all in relation to all of the experiences that I've had in the last 8 years.
Wow.
Because of the cruise ship and being in Alaska.
That's pretty cool. The fact that you've been able to do all that traveling and being able to share all these experiences and just make the best out of life after such a traumatic situation in your life. I have a story to share with you about a friend who I knew. Uh, I've known him for almost like 15, 16 years. So this was when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, I lived in this neighborhood, near where I live now, and we met. And at the time, he was drinking, doing drugs, and one day he met me and he saw me. He's like, kid, I hope you accomplish big things in your life and you don't turn out like me. So 10 years later, I'm starting college. I'm walking to class. I see a guy. He walks up to me and he says, "David, you remember me?" I'm like, Jerome? He's like, "Yeah, yeah, man. I'm back in school. I hit rock bottom. I was at one point, and then I remembered you, and I said, you know what? If I want to make something of myself, I gotta be just like that kid, and I gotta go back to school." So he
Wow.
goes, so I see him, and then he asked me, "Can you tutor me and help me with the classes?" So I dedicated weekends to help tutoring him in the library, help him get through his classes. And eventually he got his
Wow.
business degree at 50 years old. you know?
Yeah, it's never too late, right? And we
Yeah.
never know where God's going to use it. That's an incredible story.
Yeah, and
And
he found God himself too.
wow, that's an incredible story. Doesn't that just make you feel good that you did some good work? And you know, I had a guy. I share this all the time with people. No matter how challenging your life might be, you know, and the funny thing is as you know, as positive as you may try to be, it doesn't mean the rest of the world's going to do that. I've had some, you know, some things. I literally had a guy tell me a few years back, that's a good friend of mine. He says, "I'm surprised you haven't just killed yourself yet with all the, you know, the stuff you've been through in your life." It's just like, you know, and I'm like, but I have an amazing God that takes care of me, and He tells me that He'll get me through all of the stuff that the rest of the world tries to throw at you, right? And I just keep the K focused on Him. And so I always share with people, no matter how challenging your life might be, my life, your life, we always need to bring something positive into something, right? Like if you're an alcoholic or an addict and you go to a 12-step meeting and you're like, you know, this has happened, that, you know, you share, but even though that's happening, I'm not on a bar stool, or I'm not chasing a dope dealer down, or I'm not out there driving like a madman and then screwing up the world and causing an accident. I'm here in a meeting and I'm sharing so I can get some help and stuff. And so I got taught that a long time ago. And so in doing that, I had some experience. The other day, I was at a store and a guy comes walking up to me and he goes, "Hey, man, how are you?" He goes, "You don't know me from a hole in the wall, but 7 years ago, you were at a meeting over near Universal Studios and you shared some stuff on how you were living your life and some challenges you had gone through and how you'd turned your life around." And he goes, "I never introduced myself. I just left the meeting. I went home and I started living my life the way you shared that you were living yours. And I just want to let you know that it's now 7 years later, and I now have a wife and 2 kids, and my life is flourishing, and I've been doing exactly what you shared about in that meeting 7 years ago. So thanks. I just wanted to. I'm glad we had this opportunity to meet." And so we never know who we're affecting out there, right? And as I
Right.
pray every morning, I always pray, you know, so that I can shine the brightest light of the Lord out there in the world, right? Because I never know who needs it. Those homeless people, you had the gentleman you met, you work with these underprivileged youth that you work with. We don't know who needs. And if I'm out in the world running around like a grouchy old man, you know, I'm not going to be an attraction of the Lord. I'm not going to be an attraction of sobriety and stuff. And one of the things that I do, and many people think I'm a lunatic, but that's okay because my job in life is I've been given a second chance. So I want to be able to help, like you do, David, as many people as possible. So if you're talking to me within the first 5 minutes, somehow I'm letting you know that I'm sober. And if you or somebody in your family needs help, I might be able to have a solution for you. Because even though I was a homeless addict, the Lord does not want any of us walking around in shame.
Right.
He created each one of us, right? So he only makes the best. So whether you have a physical challenge or whether you end up with something you've got to overcome, whatever it is, you know, I always joke with people, you know, the Bible says that, you know, the Lord knows the number of hairs on our head and stuff. Well, the Lord knew that Rob was going to be a bunch of trouble. So he decided to remove it all. So he didn't have to deal with focusing on counting those hairs and deal on the others.
Oh man.
You know, hey, listen, if you can't have fun in life, what's the point?
Right? You
Right?
gotta be able to laugh, you know, and to enjoy life too, you know?
You have to find your joy, and you find joy in, at least for me, I find joy in helping others. You know, the more I help somebody else have a better day, the better. And it's funny because no matter what happens, there was in 2018, I ended up falling into a hole, a hatch on the cruise ship that one of the deckhands had left open. I didn't know there was a hole behind the door. I opened the door, fall in, I shred my leg. I laid on a boat for 2 hours with a belt wrapped around my leg, trying to keep me from bleeding out. We were coming back from Alaska, excuse me, and so I spent like 3 years rehabbing. It was not only recently that I've gotten to the point where I guess I'm going to be as good as I ever can. And during that time, I wrote my last book. the Is It God or Coincident book. Well, the funny thing is, when you're doing these injury things, you're dealing with insurance companies and stuff, and they don't want to pay you any money. They want to just keep all their money, and they want you to
Right.
give up and not get. Well, I just kept praying. The Lord said, "You got me. You don't need money. You got me, and I'm going to give you the greatest testimony." Right. So I almost didn't pass high school because I was having a struggle in English. 45 years later, my English teacher wrote the foreword to this book, which was amazingly cool, right?
That is cool.
But how it came about was with no money. So basically, I was living on $7 a day for over 2 years with what the money that the insurance got, and I was how I survived. God, he knows. But the point being is, how do you publish a book? How do you do an audio book? All of this stuff, right? So I write the book, and I'm like, okay, Lord, well, I don't know about commas and periods and semicolons and all of this stuff, so I can't publish what I have. You gave me great stories to write. These are all His stories, right? And these are God's stories in this book. The book you see over my shoulder, that's my life testimony, and which is aired on the 700 Club, the Hour of Power, different places like that. And so I said, Lord, you want me to get these stories out, but I need like a writing coach. So he tells me to call my friend David out of the blue. I hadn't talked to David in a while. He used to work at Warner Brothers. I call up David, and David goes, hey, I'm a pretty good writer. I just got laid off from my job at Warner Brothers. Why don't you come over to my house and let me look at what you got? David gave me 4 hours for free for a year and a half every week as a writing coach, and he ended up designing the cover. He ended up doing all the layout in the inside of it, helped me write some stuff. But then we got to so didn't charge me anything. Then I got to the end, and I'm like, David, we can't publish this. We need a real copy editor to look at this. He goes, yeah, because I'm not perfect with my English either. And I'm like, well, how are we going to do this? Because they usually want 10 to 15 cents a word, and there's 47,000 words in there. So I don't have $5,000 to pay an editor right now. I'm living on $7 a day, right? I go outside where I was staying at the time, and I'm looking in the parking lot, and my neighbor comes walking by, and she says, what's going on? I tell her, I'm doing okay, but I have this book and I can't publish it, so it's kind of a bummer. And she goes, why not? I said, well, I need a copy editor. I can't. She goes, well, why don't you just give it to me? And I said, why would I do that? And she goes, well, don't you know why I work out of my home? I said, no. She goes, because I'm a professional copy editor. I've done it for 30 years. Because I used to work for a publishing company for 30 years, and now I do my own business. And I'm like, really? She goes, yeah, I'll bless you. I'll do it at night after I get my paycheck during the day. I'll do this, and then I'll bless you with it. So she does it. She does the copy editing, gives it back to me, says, that's a really cool book. I really like that. And she goes, you know what? I really do like it. Like, give it to me again. Let me just make sure I didn't make any mistakes. And she took it again and found some things so she edited it for free. And then on the back cover, I have, you have people that say stuff about you or the book or whatever. And so one of the guys was the life coach, my friend Lee up in Northern California. And I said, Lee, would you mind reading my book? And if you like it, could you write me 1 or 2 lines to put on the back cover? So I send him a hard copy, send it up to him. He calls me and he says, hey, Rob, I got your hard copy. I'll go over it. He said, but I don't know if you know this or not, but my wife and I are professional proofreaders.
Oh,
so
wow.
while I'm reading your book to give you a testimony, I'll proofread it for free for you. So that's how it got proofread. So this is, again, God. And then in the end, I said, Lord, I really need like an author to write something on the back or something like that. He goes, well, this guy, Paul. And I said, well, yeah, but we're not like close friends or anything like that. And Paul is a Pulitzer-nominated author who's won multi-awards around the world for all his works. I said, Lord, I can't call this guy who I barely know. Lord says, you pray to me, you ask me for an answer, I give you an answer, and then you argue with me. Will you just call Paul? And so I called Paul and I said, Paul, hey, I don't know if you have any time or... He goes, dude, I would be so honored to do that for you. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. And instead of writing 2 lines, You can see that big chunk down here, that
Yeah.
whole red section. That's what Paul wrote,
Wow.
8 lines. And he compared my book to Dan Wakefield's Returning, which is a best-selling book, and Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God. So that's the two comparisons he wrote about my last book on there. And then, so I got that. So we published it. It's all wonderful. And people say you should really do an audio book. And I said, well, that's another $5,000-$6,000. I can't. I pray, and the Lord says, call your friend Rick. He's a Hollywood, sound guy. And I said, but Lord, that's like $5,000-$6,000. I can't be calling asking for a free favor. The Lord says again, you ask me who to call, I tell you who to call, and you want to argue with me. We had just called Rick. So I call Rick. I say, hey, Rick, what's going on, man? He goes, Rob, I saw you got your book published. Very cool, man. I said, yeah, people are telling me I should do an audiobook. I didn't say another word, David. He just says, dude, come over to my house tomorrow at 9 in the morning. I got my whole studio in the house. I'll set it up for you, record the book, and then it'll take me 2 or 3 months to do all the tweaks and edits because I got a big project over at one of the studios right now. But I'll bless you with it, man, and it'll be yours. So that's how God works in my life.
Wow.
It wasn't. He said, "What you're not gonna share these great stories with the world because you don't have money, Rob, but you got me, right? You have me." And so God gave me every single thing I needed to put together. And a matter of fact, the book you're looking at on the screen, I needed a proofreader. And out of the blue, this gal that I met at a wonderful church, she was proofreading all of the stuff. It was a Catholic church that she's at. She was proofreading all the stuff for the bishops in the Archdiocese of LA. And out of the blue, she just texts me and says, hey, I'm almost done working for the bishops. If you'd like me to take a look at your book before you print it, I'll proofread it for you. And I'm like, well, if it's good enough for the bishops, you're good enough for my book. So that's how the first part of this one. So the point is that if we get out of our own way, trust that the Lord loves us as much as anyone else on the planet, no matter how challenging our life may be, whatever hurdles we've got to get over, if we throw it up to him, he'll walk us through it by putting a David in our life or, a Rob or whoever it is to help us get to where we need to get. And then maybe we pass them on to someone else and they take over and, it's a whole chain of events. But that's all we're here for, is to encourage, inspire, and motivate and help one another have a better life.
Man, I gotta tell you, Rob, that your whole journey, your whole story is very motivating. It's very motivating. I truly appreciate the fact that you were very honest and out there and open. And the moral of the episode to me is, when you do kindness for someone else that's struggling, it comes back to you. And
That's
obviously
correct.
it came back to you in the form of God himself. God is like,
Yes.
you bless someone that needed your help. Someone will come back. It'll come back to you and you'll be blessed too.
Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting concept, especially when I had no money and stuff like that. It was like, but you want me to go to help somebody? And this is a story that's in the book. This was a changing moment for my life because I was going to walk out of my recovery program. I had 2 years sober. I had just got out to LA a year before, and I wasn't going to meetings. I was only going to church. And I thought that if I just hung out with God, I knew I didn't want to drink and use drugs anymore. He knew I didn't want to. So he would be my guy. But what I didn't realize was that he gave me incredible people like you and my sponsor and all these people in meetings that all had similar life stories. We all thought we were on Misfit Island, like on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, right? And we all thought we were the throwaways of society because of choices we'd made along the way. And the reality was that so many of us have added so much value to the world after we've gotten sober. But I was 2 years sober. I had a beat up old car that my dad was nice enough to give me. The paint was falling off. It had no air conditioning, roll up windows, and I'm in LA. It's like, how do you survive, And my broadcasting career was gone. I hadn't got back on track yet. I was selling cars at a time, and nothing wrong with selling cars, but it wasn't where my dream was, right? And so I went into an AA meeting one day, and I said, hey guys, this works for you. It doesn't work for me. You all have fancy cars, and you all have nice homes, and you all have good relationships. You're making good money. You're working in Hollywood. You're doing all this stuff. I said, I'm out of here. This ain't working for me. And I missed the point that I was 2 years sober. And that's the whole point of a recovery program, right? Is to get sober, not to, if you make a lot of money or whatever, that's wonderful, but it's not the key to success. It doesn't make you the success, right? And luckily, after the meeting, David, this big tall guy. I don't know who he is. I hope he's still doing wonderful well. He was older. He may have passed. Who knows? But I hope he had an amazingly blessed rest of his life, because he came up to me and he literally stuck his finger in my chest. And he said, Rob, he said, you know why your life sucks right now? Because all you do is come to these meetings every day and whine and complain about how bad your life sucks. He goes, when are you going to start doing something for somebody else? When are you going to come to a meeting and like set up the chairs or sweep the floor or make the coffee or get here early and say hi to somebody who's newer than you? When are you going to do something for anybody but you? And I was like, huh? He goes, all you're doing right now is giving us a major headache every day you show up here of all your whining and complaining. And I'm like, whoa. And I drove home to my little guest house I was in. And I looked in the mirror and I said, okay, you've got two choices. You can either continue whining and complaining and ruining people's lives, or you can get your act together and start thinking about other people. And I showed up the next morning and I got there early and I helped set up chairs and I helped clean up the car. And I felt like a whole new human being, just in a matter of hours of going from Rob, where's mine, to, you know what? Let me see what I can do to make somebody else's day a little bit better. And all of a sudden, it's 30 years later, and I've got 30 years of sobriety. And as I shared all those interesting, amazing things in Alaska, I was just the other day, I was standing at the front of the Mendenhall Glacier, which wasn't my most brilliant thought. I saw a bunch of other people out there, so I thought, you know what, I can just go out there because they're already there. So the lake, it's a 1.5 mile lake. I won't fall in. The next day I get back and somebody showed me where somebody had taken a drone and putting it over right where I had been standing, and right behind the wall of ice where I was, it was all water.
Oh
If I had
man.
unknowingly, if I had taken like 5 more steps, I would have been falling into freezing cold water, being pulled out and rescued. So the Lord is with us.
Oh, Rob, thank you so much, man, for sharing your testimony with me. It was very motivating and definitely appreciate it. And I hope my listeners here appreciate it. And
Oh man. Thank you for having me. And if you can go to, do you want to hear more of that crazy story? Go to Amazon and you can see Cruising Toward Heaven, which just came out. And also, Is It God or Coincidence? Again, these are God stories that he gave me to share. They're pretty miraculous. And actually, there's a faith-based film being written on this book right now. So hopefully that'll be out in the not too distant future either. So, and the new book is my testimony of more of those insane things but life lessons that I learned and shared with you as well. So thank you, David. It's been an amazing blessing to meet you. And I hope you have an amazingly blessed day, and all of your audience. And I hope to see you again in the not too distant future.
Thank you. We definitely have to connect again. And of course, this episode you're gonna find it on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and every other major podcasting outlet out there. Rob, thank you for an enjoyable, exciting, funny episode. I definitely enjoyed it. Thank you so much, man.
Oh, you blessed my day. I'm going to have an amazing day because you got me off to a great start here. Thank you so much, David.
You stay blessed, my friend, and everybody in my audience as well. Take care and be blessed.